Okay, we're going to pick up on the second part of Act 1, Scene 3.
The soup on the stove, if there's anyone who cares to eat. Margot, will you take the bread out?
Margot gets the bread from the cupboard.
I don't know how we can go on living this way. I can't say a word to Anne. She flies at me.
You know Anne. In half an hour she'll be out here laughing and joking.
And
She makes a motion upwards, indicating the Von Dons.
I told your father it wouldn't work, but no, he had to ask them. He said he owed it to them, he said. Well, he knows now that I was right. These quarrels, this bickering.
With a warning look.
Shush! Shush!
The buzzer for the door sounds. Mrs. Frank gasps, startled.
Every time I hear that sound, my heart stops.
Starting for Peter's door.
It's Miep.
She knocks at the door.
Father?
And why do you guys think that every time they hear the buzzer for the door go off, why did Miss Frank say that her heart stops every time?
Mr. Frank comes quickly from Peter's room.
Thank you, Margot.
As he goes down the steps to open the outer door.
Has everyone his list?
I'll get my books.
Giving her mother a list.
Here's your list.
Margot goes into her and Anne's bedroom on the right. Anne sits up, hiding her tears as Margot comes in.
Miep's here.
Margot picks up her books and goes back. Anne hurries over to the mirror, smoothing her hair. Coming down the stairs.
Is it Miep?
Yes. Father's gone down to let her in.
At last I'll have some cigarettes.
I can't tell you how unhappy I am about Mrs. Von Don's coat. Anne should never have touched it.
She'll be all right.
Is there anything I can do?
Don't worry.
He turns to meet Miep, but it is not Miep who comes up the steps. It is Mr. Crawler, followed by Mr. Frank. Their faces are grave. Anne comes from the bedroom. Peter comes from his room.
Mr. Crawler.
How are you, Mr. Crawler?
This is a surprise.
When Mr. Crawler comes, the sun begins to shine.
Miep is coming?
Not tonight.
Crawler goes to Margot and Mrs. Frank and Anne, shaking hands with them.
Wouldn't you like a cup of coffee? Or better still, will you have supper with us?
Mr. Crawler has something to talk over with us. Something has happened, he says, which demands an immediate decision.
What is it?
Mr. Crawler sits down on the couch. As he talks, he takes bread, cabbages, milk, etc. from his briefcase, giving them to Margot and Anne to put away.
Usually, when I come up here, I try to bring you some bit of good news. What's the use of telling you the bad news when there's nothing that you can do about it? But today, something has happened. Dirk, Miep's Dirk, you know, came to me just now. He tells me that he has a Jewish friend living near him, a dentist. He says he's in trouble. He begged me, could I do anything for this man? Could I find him a hiding place? So I've come to you. I know it's a terrible thing to ask of you, living as you are, but would you take him in with you?
Of course we will.
Rising.
It'll be just for a night or two, until I find some other place. This happened so suddenly that I didn't know where to turn.
Where is he?
Downstairs in the office.
Good, bring him up.
His name is Dussel. Jan Dussel.
Dussel. I think I know him.
I'll get him.
Okay, guys, so I want you to think about that. We've got this other person who, Mr. Crawler, the person who helps Miep hide the Franks and the Von Dons, has just come to them and said that they actually have another person that they would like to have, come kind of stay with them because he's in trouble, he needs to get away, he needs a hiding place. So I want you guys to make a prediction about what you think is going to happen. Do you think, just a regular old prediction about bringing in a new person? What do you think will happen when a new person is brought in? It could be a good thing, a bad thing, scary thing. Like, what do you personally think? Now that they're bringing in this new person, it's about, 2 months into them hiding. So with the way everything's been so far, they haven't been caught yet. How do you think it'll be with another person living with them? I'm going to go ahead and have you guys answer that on a Padlet.
On the steps and out. Mr. Frank suddenly becomes conscious of the others.
Forgive me, I spoke without consulting you, but I knew you'd feel as I do.
There's no reason for you to consult anyone. This is your place. You have a right to do exactly as you please. The only thing I feel, there's so little food as it is, and to take in another person.
Peter turns away, ashamed of his father.
We can stretch the food a little. It's only for a few days.
You want to make a bet?
I think it's fine to have him. But, Otto, where are you going to put him? Where?
He can have my bed. I can sleep on the floor. I wouldn't mind.
That's good of you, Peter, but your room's too small, even for you.
I have a much better idea. I'll come in here with you and Mother, and Margot can take Peter's room, and Peter can go in our room with Mr. Dussel.
That's right. We could do that.
No, Margot, you mustn't sleep in that room. Neither you nor Anne. Mushy has caught some rats in there. Peter's brave. He doesn't mind.
Then how about this? I'll come in here with you and Mother, and Mr. Dussel can have my bed.
No, no, no. Margot will come in here with us, and he can have her bed. It's the only way. Margot, bring your things in here. Help her, Anne.
Margot hurries into her room to get her things.
Why Margot? Why can't I come in here?
Because it wouldn't be proper for Margot to sleep with a... Please, Anne, don't argue. Please.
So what her mom is trying to say is that, Margot's older. Margot is, like 16 or so. So it's different for her to stay in the room with an older man. Whereas it's a little better because Anne's still a child, right? So it's not, she's not as old and mature as Margot. So it makes more sense for Anne to share the room with the new person.
Anne starts slowly away.
You don't mind sharing your room with Mr. Dussel, do you, Anne?
No, of course not.
Good.
Anne goes off into her bedroom, helping Margot. Mr. Frank starts to search in the cupboards.
Where's the cognac?
It's there. But, Otto, I was saving it in case of illness.
I think we couldn't find a better time to use it. Peter, will you get 5 glasses for me?
Peter goes for the glasses. Margot comes out of her bedroom, carrying her possessions, which she hangs behind a curtain in the main room. Mr. Frank finds the cognac and pours it into the 5 glasses that Peter brings him. Mr. Van Daan stands looking on sourly. Mrs. Van Daan comes downstairs and looks around at all the bustle.
What's happening? What's going on?
Someone's moving in with us.
In here? You're joking.
It's only for a night or two, until Mr. Crowler finds him another place.
Yeah.
Mr. Frank hurries over as Mr. Crowler and Dussel come up. Dussel is a man in his late 50s, meticulous, finicky, bewildered now. He wears a raincoat. He carries a briefcase stuffed full and a small medicine case.
Come in, Mr. Dussel.
This is Mr. Frank.
Mr. Otto Frank?
Yes, let me take your things.
He takes the hat and briefcase, but Dussel clings to his medicine case.
This is my wife, Edith, Mr. and Mrs. Van Daan, their son, Peter, and my daughters, Margot and Anne.
Dussel shakes hands with everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Thank you all. Mr. Dussel, I leave you in good hands. Oh, Dirk's coat.
Dussel hurriedly takes off the raincoat, giving it to Mr. Crowler. Underneath is his white dentist jacket, with a yellow Star of David on it.
What can I say to thank you?
Mr. Crowler and Meep, they're our lifeline. Without them, we couldn't live.
Please, you make us seem very heroic. It isn't that at all. We simply don't like the Nazis.
To Mr. Frank, who offers him a drink.
No, thanks. We don't like their methods. We don't like...
I know. No one's going to tell us Dutchmen what to do with our Jews.
Pay no attention to Mr. Frank. I'll be up tomorrow to see that they're treating you right. Don't trouble to come down again. Peter will bolt the door after me, won't you, Peter?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Peter. I'll do it.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Mr. Crowler.
See you in the morning.
Mr. Crowler goes out with Mr. Frank. Mrs. Frank gives each one of the grown-ups a glass of cognac.
Please, Mr. Dussel, sit down.
Mr. Dussel sinks into a chair. Mrs. Frank gives him a glass of cognac.
I'm dreaming. I know it. I can't believe my eyes. Mr. Otto Frank here?
To Mrs. Frank.
You're not in Switzerland, then? A woman told me. She said she'd gone to your house. The door was open. Everything was in disorder, dishes in the sink. She said she found a piece of paper in the wastebasket with an address scribbled on it. An address in Zurich. She said you must have escaped to Zurich.
Father put that there purposely, just so people would think that very thing.
And you've been here all the time?
All the time. Ever since July.
Anne speaks to her father as he comes back.
Yeah, remember that they're actually staying just in the same town that they've lived in. But as we can see, Mr. Frank purposely left this address to another city or country so that the authorities, when they came looking for them, would know that, or would think that they had actually gone to Zurich, and they would stop looking for them. And what actually happened in the very beginning, which it doesn't really say in the story, but the reason they had to go into hiding is because Margot received a letter in the mail saying that she would need to come to serve her time at a concentration camp. So her parents were like, nope, that's not going to happen. So that's why they decided that they would go into hiding, because they got that note asking for Margot to go to the concentration camp.
Worked, Pim. The address you left. Mr. Dussel says that people believe we escaped to Switzerland.
I'm glad. And now, let's have a little drink to welcome Mr. Dussel.
Before they can drink, Mr. Dussel bolts his drink. Mr. Frank smiles and raises his glass.
To Mr. Dussel, welcome. We're very honored to have you with us.
To Mr. Dussel, welcome.
The Van Dans murmur a welcome. The grown-ups drink.
Oh, that was good.
Did Mr. Crowler warn you that you won't get much to eat here? You can imagine 3 ration books among the 7 of us, and now you make 8.
Peter walks away, humiliated. Outside, a street organ is heard dimly.
As you can tell, Peter often is ashamed of his dad, the things that he says, right? I mean, he's being kind of rude, making it seem like Mr. Dussel isn't welcome there.
Rising.
Mr. Van Daan, you don't realize what is happening outside, that you should warn me of a thing like that. You don't realize what's going on.
As Mr. Van Daan starts his characteristic pacing, Dussel turns to speak to the others.
Right here in Amsterdam, every day hundreds of Jews disappear. They surround a block and search house by house. Children come home from school to find their parents gone. Hundreds are being deported. People that you and I know. The Hollensteins, the Vessels.
Oh, no.
They get their call-up notice. Come to the Jewish theater on such and such a day and hour. Bring only what you can carry in a rucksack. And if you refuse the call-up notice, then they come and drag you from your home and ship you off to Mauthausen, the death camp.
We didn't know that things had got so much worse.
Forgive me for speaking so.
Do you know the De Waals? What's become of them? Their daughter Yopi and I are in the same class. Yopi's my best friend.
They are gone.
Gone?
With all the others.
Oh no, not Yopi.
She turns away in tears. Mrs. Frank motions to Margot to comfort her. Margot goes to Anne, putting her arms comfortingly around her.
There were some people called Wagner. They live near us.
I think we should put this off until later. We all have many questions we want to ask, but I'm sure that Mr. Dussel would like to get settled before supper.
Thank you. I would. I brought very little with me.
Giving him his hat and briefcase.
I'm sorry we can't give you a room alone, but I hope you won't be too uncomfortable. We've had to make strict rules here. A schedule of hours. We'll tell you after supper. Anne, would you like to take Mr. Dussel to his room?
If you'll come with me, Mr. Dussel.
She starts for her room, shaking hands with each in turn.
Forgive me if I haven't really expressed my gratitude to all of you. This has been such a shock to me. I'd always thought of myself as Dutch. I was born in Holland. My father was born in Holland, and my grandfather. And now, after all these years...
He breaks off.
if you'll excuse me.
Dussel gives a little bow and hurries off after Anne. Mr. Frank and the others are subdued.
Yeah, as you notice, see, Mr. Dussel is saying, like, I always thought I was Dutch. You know, I was born in Holland. My father was born there also. So was my grandfather. So if you're born in Holland, you're typically Dutch. But because they have Jewish line in their family, or because, you know, he's got Jewish blood, even though he was born in Holland, he's Jewish. So, you know, even he's being discriminated against.
Turning on the light,
Well, here we are.
Dussel looks around the room. In the main room, Margot speaks to her mother.
The news sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? It's so different from what Mr. Crowler tells us. Mr. Crowler says things are improving.
I like it better the way Crowler tells it.
They resume their occupations quietly. Peter goes off into his room. In Anne's room, Anne turns to Dussel.
You're going to share the room with me.
I'm a man who's always lived alone. I haven't had to adjust myself to others. I hope you'll bear with me until I learn.
Let me help you.
She takes his briefcase.
Do you always live all alone? Have you no family at all?
No one.
He opens his medicine case and spreads his bottles on the dressing table.
How dreadful. You must be terribly lonely.
I'm used to it.
I don't think I could ever get used to it. Didn't you even have a pet? A cat or a dog?
I have an allergy for fur-bearing animals. They give me asthma.
Oh, dear. Peter has a cat.
Here? He has it here?
Yes, but we hardly ever see it. He keeps it in his room all the time. I'm sure it will be all right.
Let us hope so.
He takes some pills to fortify himself.
That's Margot's bed where you're going to sleep. I sleep on the sofa there.
Indicating the clothes hooks on the wall.
We cleared these off for your things.
She goes over to the window.
The best part about this room, you can look down and see a bit of the street and the canal. There's a houseboat. You can see the end of it. A bargeman lives there with his family. They have a baby, and he's just beginning to walk, and I'm so afraid he's going to fall into the canal someday. I watch him.
Your father spoke of a schedule.
Coming away from the window.
Oh, yes. It's mostly about the times we have to be quiet, and times for the WC. You can use it now if you like.
No, thank you.
I suppose you think it's awful, my talking about a thing like that. But you don't know how important it can get to be, especially when you're frightened. About this room, the way Margot and I did, she had it to herself in the afternoons for studying, reading, lessons, you know. And I took the mornings. Would that be all right with you?
I'm not at my best in the morning.
You stay here in the mornings, then. I'll take the room in the afternoons.
Tell me, when you're in here, what happens to me? Where am I spending my time? In there? With all the people?
Yes.
I see.
We have supper at 6:30.
Going over to the sofa.
Then, if you don't mind, I like to lie down quietly for 10 minutes before eating. I find it helps the digestion.
Of course. I hope I'm not going to be too much of a bother to you. I seem to be able to get everyone's back up.
Dussel lies down on the sofa, curled up, his back to her.
I always get along very well with children. My patients all bring their children to me because they know I get on well with them. So don't you worry about that.
Anne leans over him, taking his hand and shaking it gratefully.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dussel.
The lights dim to darkness. The curtain falls on the scene. Anne's voice comes to us faintly at first, and then with increasing power.
Okay, before we read the last part of the scene, which is one of Anne's diary entries, I want you guys to think about, what do you think she's going to write about in this new diary entry? Okay, we're going to do a Padlet, and I want you guys to write down what you think she'll write about. Think about everything that's happened in this scene so far, everything that we've heard today, and I want you to kind of tell me what you think she's going to write about in her diary entry. Okay, so we're going to do that on a Padlet.
Yesterday I finished Sissy Van Marksveldt's latest book. I think she is a first-class writer. I shall definitely let my children read her. Monday, the 21st of September, 1942. Mr. Dizzle and I had another battle yesterday. Yes, Mr. Dizzle. According to him, nothing, I repeat, nothing is right about me. My appearance, my character, my manners. Well, he was going on at me, I thought. Sometime I'll give you such a smack that you'll fly right up to the ceiling. Why is it that every grown-up thinks he knows the way to bring up children, particularly the grown-ups that never had any? I keep wishing that Peter was a girl instead of a boy. And then I would have someone to talk to. Margot's a darling, but she takes everything too seriously. To pause for a moment on the subject of Mrs. Van Daan, I must tell you that her attempts to flirt with Father are getting her nowhere. Pim, thank goodness, won't play.
As she is saying the last lines, the curtain rises on the darkened scene. Anne's voice fades out.
All right, guys, so that's the end of Act 1, Scene 3, and we will begin Act 1, Scene 4 next time.